Hello and welcome to the podcast, The Way of the Sensitive. I'm your host, Cara Wilde. This is a podcast for those of us who feel called to live in a different way, to create a new society where diversity and uniqueness is celebrated, not shamed. We're the channels of the light, co-creating a heaven on earth upon this beautiful planet. We're here to live and achieve our soul's goals in this lifetime. To us, it's not woo, it's real. Calling all the magic makers, the mystics, the empaths, the sensitives, the starseeds, the autistic ones, sometimes sidelined, sometimes scapegoated, but we know that we're here to create new pathways in the one mind, because it's not just about traversing alternative dimensions, it's also about landing and being fully alive in this gorgeous world. Hey gorgeous, welcome to episode 18, and today I'm talking to Deborah Chalk, who is a career and life purpose coach and certified Martha Beck coach. And this was such a rich conversation. I loved talking to Deborah. There's something about her, whether it's because she's another highly sensitive person and slightly introverted, but she's just got this really deep and calm presence, but also so rich, full of ideas and resources for helping people who are in times of transition, and particularly career and life purpose transition. So we talk about all sorts of transitions. We talk about the difference between a should career and authentic career, how to recognize the qualities of those two different paths and why we choose one over the other at times. We discuss how to choose the voices in your head that support authentic work and authentic career, and where the voices that steer you in the wrong direction actually come from, where those actually originated. And for those of you that are in jobs and careers that are okay, or they're really not okay, that you're not in authentic work right now, but you are actually needing to pay the bills, Deborah has some really strong, really good power questions to ask yourself so that you can navigate work in a way that may surprise you, a way that may be more rewarding than you think is possible now. And we also dip into different kinds of transitions, and not just work and career, but all sorts of different types of transitions that we can go through. And now, in particular, as sensitives, healers and empaths, we really need to take care of ourselves so that we can navigate those times more easily. And the different creative experiences that we can have that support that, the fact that we need to support ourselves nutritionally, and how self-compassion never lets us off the hook, but calls us to dig in even deeper with self-love. It's just a really rich conversation, and I would love it if you've had any aha moments over what your authentic work or purpose is, whether you're in the right job or not, or you've listened to the power questions and you've thought, actually, no, this is the right work for me. I can see that now, or I can see that I can do some subtle shifts that will make all the difference. Particularly listen to what Deborah calls the 3 Bs. So if you want to share, I'd love to see you over in the free Facebook group, The Way of the Sensitive. Enjoy the podcast. Catch you on the other side. All right. So hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 18 of the podcast, The Way of the Sensitive. And today our guest is Deborah Chalk. Sorry, I do that a lot. It's Deborah Chalk. And Deborah is a career and life purpose coach. So welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here as well, Cara.
So we have just been comparing notes. It's a very sunny day over here in England, and Deborah's in England as well. And one of the questions I always ask when we start the podcast is, do you consider yourself a sensitive? And if you do, what do you like about being sensitive?
Right. Well, I definitely consider myself as being sensitive. And I think this stems right from, in childhood, feeling particularly sensitive. And at school, if you go to a big bustly school, it can be quite hard as a sensitive child because you feel everything that much more.
Yeah.
Luckily, my childhood was quite stable in that we were in the same location.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, the schools that I went to in Glasgow, there was a lot going on. You know, I found that being sensitive at that stage, it meant that you have this thing about you want to do your best. I think that sensitivity can sometimes be linked to always wanting to do your best because you're so aware of how you're performing, you're noticing, and there's a danger of perfectionism there as well.
Mm-hmm.
On the plus side, it meant that I worked really hard at school, and because I had to focus, if you don't focus, there's so much distraction, you don't cope.
Yes.
And I found that despite my sensitivity, I was able to do things that surprise people. So I took part in a musical, and I took the lead in a musical, and people would have thought perhaps that quiet person couldn't do that. But I think the thing about drama and the arts and creativity is that it allows you to kind of step out of that quiet, sensitive self, and for a short time be that other you, that one that is able to go and stand on a stage and sing or act or whatever. And then my sensitivity helped me when I was teaching, because I think you are able to tune into children and their needs so much more than you could if you were not sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
And then nowadays I use my sensitivity as a coach, because you'll know yourself, Cara, we tune into our clients, we pick up much more than they say.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't sensitive, I don't think I would be able to do that in the same way that I can. So I see it as a huge gift, and I see it as something that it will always be with me. It's never going to, you know, I'm never going to read the self-help book that's going to make me not sensitive.
Yes.
And I don't know if I want to.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of who I am. I know that I'm very different from other people in my life because of that. And that's okay too. I don't need to be the same as them. I don't need to be able to you know, to cope with situations that are not comfortable to me.
Yeah.
But this might sound crazy and maybe not to your audience, but I've never been to a big concert. In my life, I've never been to a big concert. I've been to the theatre.
Mm-hmm.
I love the theatre, but I don't think it's my thing. I just don't think I would enjoy it. And I think that's partly down to realising it would feel a bit too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I went to see Bon Jovi live in Sheffield when I was in my early 20s, because I absolutely adored them. And I spent most of it sat down on the floor surrounded by sweaty bodies because I couldn't cope.
It's all too much. So, you know, I think this is part of it, is realising what's comfortable for you as a sensitive. Yeah. And then having we learn as coaches and in self-help about boundaries and about saying, you know, tuning in for yourself and saying, is that something that's going to feel good to me or not? Mm-hmm. And it can be the same in your social life. You know, being a sensitive person doesn't mean you have to be a hermit and never go out. I love a good party, but I enjoy it in my own way. You know, and I'll realise, like, in a great party, I will, throughout the evening, sometimes do things that are kind of less focused on other people. Yeah. So I went to a ball in the summer, and, for example, they had a casino. So you didn't pay any money in the casino. It was just pretend casino. But I'd never played blackjack, didn't know blackjack. And I thought, I'll just have a look and see what blackjack is. And it was interesting to watch the different people and to watch the croupier and what they were doing, and his mental maths, you know, as a teacher in the past really impressed me. And it was just, you know, that wasn't about interacting with lots of people. That was about just being within a big party situation and just almost like taking the time within it to step back and just notice. And then other times to be completely in the middle of the party and talking to people. And I think as sensitives, we're very able to listen to others and to make others feel more heard, perhaps, than most other people can do. This is an enormous gift. So you don't have to go into the party having all the great stories and anecdotes. If you go to something and you just make other people feel completely heard,
that's a superpower.
Yeah. It's a superpower.
Yeah. It sounds like you've spent a lot of time reflecting on your sensitivities and also like really deepened into self-acceptance around it, which is like, that's the key and something that a lot of people can struggle with for sure, because we've got such an, we can live in such a noisy world, and it's all about being gregarious. But that self-acceptance really helped you to use it in a way that works for you and enriches your life. Yeah.
And I think, this ultimately led to my journey as far as career goes as well, because I found that, I was working in a merchant bank in London in the 1990s, and
Wow.
it was a very different environment. It was corporate banking, multi-million loans. And there was an element of it, I mean, there were some great people there, absolutely, but there was an element of it was a little bit like Mad Men. And I'm thinking, there's all the little offices with the frosted glass and everything like that. And there was the typist that had been there since the 1950s. And although she was now the word processing person. And it was an incredible, comedy of all human relationships. But I didn't fit in at all. And it wasn't the right place for a sensitive person, and I just thought, I can't see myself doing this.
What happened? What kind of let you know that you didn't fit in, other than just kind of not enjoying it? Was there anything else that kind of happened that let you know? Like, fit in is a very different way of describing something than I wasn't enjoying it, I didn't like the work. That's quite substantial, and I think a lot of people listening could probably relate to that, but not quite know. So if there's if you could describe what was happening to you to let you know that you didn't fit in, what does that mean for you?
I think it's where you start putting on a mask and you're not being yourself. You're trying too much to fit in.
Yeah.
I think you feel it in your body because you have a feeling of discomfort in your body and almost like you're in the wrong shoes.
Yeah.
And I think you also have signs when you're not caring for yourself very well. You might think you are. Like, I used to think, I'm caring for myself well because I used to go to the gym every night. It was Cannon's gym in London. It's not an affiliate link though, I just remember. It's this kind of really trendy gym in London that people used to go to. And that was part of my life, but it was so robotic. It was like, there wasn't any, it's where you're able to put your soul into your work.
Yeah.
And for some people, the buzz of a successful job like that will be enough for their soul will reach out to that and love it. But I could tell that my soul wasn't, and so that meant it was the wrong choice for me. One idea I have is the idea of a shiny button job.
Okay.
A shiny button job is a job that you do perhaps because it impresses your parents or people that you think matter. And Martha Beck has a concept of this, of you're everybody, so what everybody thinks.
Yeah.
So everybody thinks that I should become a lawyer. Everybody thinks that I should become a doctor, because those are fantastic professions. And for some people, they'll be wonderful. But if it's just for the shiny buttons, it looks impressive, then that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right thing for you.
Yeah, mine was counsellor.
Was it?
Mine was to go to university. I was good with people. I was caring and understanding. And so it was to go and study psychology and be a counsellor. And I'm so glad I did.
Yes.
I wouldn't change that, but to work in a drug and alcohol agency and domestic violence. But my spiritual things, channeling, talking to spirit, helping people on that level, that's what lights me up. That's the difference.
Yes.
So the counselling was kind of manageable.
Yes.
But it didn't light me up.
Yeah. And it's where it starts to drain you as well. And I was saying about the everybody says, your everybody is usually made up about, say, 4 or 5 people in your life.
Yeah.
Your everybody, maybe when you're saying that, you mean like your mum and dad, your partner, your best friend from school or whatever, and they're making up your everybody. But your everybody, when you talk about everybody thinks that, might not be working for you.
Yeah. And
one thing you can do is then say, if I was going to design a new everybody, And these people were going to be ultimately supportive to me and say, you know, that's great, Cara, that you then go and do this, you know, more intuitive work, and we value that and we think it's important and special. Who would be on my everybody then? And you can decide, and then you can even, you know, do meditation where you bring yourself into meditation and you imagine these people around the table, like a board of directors on your business or in your life, and ask your new everybody what they think you should be doing. So
that's brilliant.
Yeah, this is from Martha Beck that I trained with, my life coach training with. But the difference here as well is also between the social self and the essential self. So the social self is the self that's trying to impress, it's driven by the ego, it's interested in advancing prestige. And then the essential self is our true heart self, who is, you know, from the soul, who's willing to do things even if others aren't going to accept them.
Yeah.
You know, even for me, like becoming a life coach, I had a big resistance to that at first because it was, you know, especially it's not as accepted in England, and I still don't think it really is as much.
That's a really good point. It's not. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, when you say it, I used to at first feel, oh, cringe, bit cheesy. And now, you know, it's just like, this is what I do. It makes a big difference to people. I help people with getting in touch with their life purpose and their career. If somebody doesn't get that, I'm not going to go back and work in a bank because of it, you know, because they have a judgment on it, because that's their judgment, that's their business. And Byron Katie, that does the work, she talks about there's 3 kinds of business: your business, their business, and she calls it God's business, or the universe's business, if you don't believe in God in the same way. But if I'm always worried about what they think, I'm getting into their business.
Yeah.
I've got no place to be there.
And I think, you know, I've read all of Martha Beck's books and listened to quite a few of them on my runs as well. And so that everybody concept is quite familiar to me. But I kind of want to say we do literally go around thinking everybody is going to say this. We use that word everybody, and breaking it down into actually who are they. I've got a friend who says, who's your passengers on your bus?
Oh,
you know, yeah. And who needs to get off at this stop? And who do you need to invite back on? And I think it's so clarifying and empowering to recognize that everybody, they don't really exist in the way that we think that they do. And then it's like, I have been working with this, I don't know if you have this, but I have been working with this concept for a while, you know, but still hearing you say, oh, Cara, it's really good and we really value that you're working in that way. There's a part of me that's like, oh, I still need to hear that so much.
Yeah.
You know, I still need to kind of remind myself of that. And because there can still be, there's no way I would go back to that environment. It was toxic for me in the end because I was working, you kind of feel like you're working blind. You're not doing your best job. But I can still feel that tug of war. I don't know, have you completely let go of that kind of tug between that essential and social self?
I think we always have the social self. It's the ego brain.
Yeah.
And we will always have that.
That's a relief.
It will always be.
It's normal, yeah.
But it's actually recognizing when it comes up and noticing it and saying, there it is. You know, some people call it the gremlin or the inner lizard or whatever you like.
Yes, true.
Oh, there it is. And, you know, Martha says about imagining your inner lizard, and when it comes up, you know, patting it on the head and saying, oh, thanks for trying to help, but I've got this. And then sending your lizard off to go and, you know, lounge by the pool with a bunch of grapes and a nice fruit smoothie. So, you know, you don't have to be kind of angry at it, you know,
or battle with yourself.
To, you know, make fun of what I'm doing and have this internal battle. It's a really natural human thing to have. It's probably always going to be there. It's the same thing that when we have self-doubt, when we have self-criticism, unless you're completely and utterly narcissistic, it's quite likely as a human being you will always have self-doubt and self-criticism.
Yeah.
And recognizing that and being kind to yourself through that, I think, is the way forward.
Yeah. And when you just, before I want to ask you another question about what happened when you made that shift yourself, but when you mentioned about who you're going to invite in, like into this almost this mastermind for your imagining who is going to be your new everybody. For my channeling friends, I know I do this and we do this. We have, like, as part of my mastermind group as well, we have our own like guides in there. So I've got Goddess Lilith, who advises me about finances in my business. I've got Kafumi in there that advises me about like my heart-centered practice when I'm making choices about interviews and things. And I forget to put people in there, you know. So what kind of people are you talking about? Like the new everybody's being people that you know, people that are famous that you want there, like I think one of mine might be Jane Austen, you know.
It could absolutely be Jane Austen. I think it can be people that you know that you would really like to, you know, tap into I think it's their energy.
Yeah, for sure.
It's more than who they are, it's their energy.
Yeah.
So you might not need, and you don't need to know exactly what they think about every, you know, they don't have to be a business expert to be able to help you with your business. It's just effectively another way of tapping into your intuition or your wise self, and it's a doorway to doing that. I think it can also be angels as well. So you were saying about the passengers in your car, you know, you can be driving along the motorway or whatever it's called where you are, and think, you know, I've got my guardian angels in my passenger seat on my left, and I've got another angel in the back seat, and, you know, they're there for me, and what are they here to tell me about what's coming up today? So absolutely, whatever works for you, be that, you know, your guides that you tap into, your guardian angels, or the energy of people that you would like to infuse into your own life. One of those can be your future self as well.
Okay, cool.
Be yourself like 20 years from now who has all that wisdom, or just you know, I love the Lively show, Jess Lively's podcast, and she talks a lot about, you know, tapping into your intuition through writing to your wise self.
Right.
So you can actually ask, you know, get into a settled place, a grounded place, and then be asking your wise self, what do you think about this? And then write your answers from the point of view of your wise self.
That's a good exercise.
If you were doing something creative, you could write to Jane Austen. You could ask Jane what she has to think about this, and then write her answers.
It's like like in my language, it's like multidimensional beings, and we can just tap into this field that's just rich with information. And like you were saying, being a sensitive, it's almost like, you know, we've got not a leading edge, we've got I can't think of the word.
It's an advantage.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. It's an advantage to doing that. And you know, I think that I teach people how to channel their guides as well, and making that connection, and that is just another way of tapping into that field. And once you start working with one guide, they act as like just this way of opening up this vast portal to work with archetypes, really. So it's beautiful when we take time to remember that we have got more options in physical reality, as I call it, than we can kind of think we have when we're just watching television, or we're bombarded with the news, or we're in that rut of conditioning of what we think we should be doing.
It's interesting you should say that. I think, you know, you bring up a really valid point there. I think when you're talking about all the television and the news, it can be really, really hard as a sensitive person. And again, I think you can make choices with that about how you consume news. I think I'm learning that I don't want to block myself off completely to all that's happening in the world.
Yeah.
But I think as a very visual person, I'm able to handle listening to the news more than I can watching the news.
Mm.
And you can also think about the times of day when it's better for you to tune in to the news than other times. So I think as sensitives, it's important not to shelter yourself from everything, because we're also, people who can make a difference in the world.
Yeah.
And because of that, we need to know what's going on. Yeah. But I think you can do that in a way which is respectful to your own sensitivity.
For sure. And I think one of the choices that I think is available as well is, like, mainstream news is not the only way that we can find out what's going on in the world. And it's probably not, in my opinion, the most accurate description of what's going on in the world anyway. So I think the fact that there's plenty of choice, we have choices, is a good reminder. So can you tell us a bit about what, like, your before and after states of what it was like when you shift from working in that bank and then discovered what it is that lit you up, that your soul was calling? What was that like? How did that play out for you?
It was kind of a long journey. I went into teaching because that seemed to it did call me, and there's still a huge part of me that's a teacher.
Yeah.
Because I think as a coach, there's an element of it which is teaching. It's not all, because we're not telling people what to do, of course. We're helping them find their own answers, but that is a kind of teaching. So there's an element of teaching. So I was teaching in primary schools, so that is sort of between age 7 and 11. And I really enjoyed it, but I found the workload is extremely high. And if you have any teacher listeners, they will completely get this. And as a very, a person who's committed to doing my best work, you could literally work all the time as a teacher. Yeah. We were also, as a family, we were moving very regularly. So with my husband's job, so we've moved 10 times in the 18 years that we've been married.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was finding it really hard because I was making these really lovely relationships with people in the school that I was working with. And I think as a sensitive, you tend to, when you do make relationships, you make deeper relationships. So we don't really do the surface stuff, and the cocktail party chat just isn't always our thing. We like to have deep connections with people. And it can be very difficult if you make these deep connections with people and you build up huge amounts of trust, and then you have to leave. And it's quite traumatic, and it puts you into the first stage of the change cycle, which is death and rebirth. So it's the death of the old part of you before the new part of you is born. And the mantra of that square, which again from Martha, is, I don't know what the hell is going on. And that's okay, because when a big change like that happens, it's like the whole apple cart gets turned upside down and you don't know what's going on. And that was happening to me over and over, and I was making it mean something about me.
Right. Yeah.
And then I went to, we moved house, and this was after a number of moves, and I'd done a number of teaching jobs. And we got a puppy. He's now 12. We got a puppy, and I had an interview on the Monday to go to another school and, have the interview for another full-time job. And the daft thing was, Cara, I decided I didn't want to leave this puppy at home. So it was all about a puppy. and it was a mixture of just, realizing there must be something that's going to fit in with this life better. And for the moment, I'll just stay home and look after the puppy.
And isn't it like that sometimes, like that decision making just happens in what seems like the most unorthodox, unrelated kind of circumstances and situations? You just reach a point where, I'm really, really good at analysing, so not good. I do it a lot, so forgive me, I'm probably way off, but I would like that connection of innocence and love and getting into that field might have just helped you just think, enough's enough. That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
So then I went on a massive journey of self-discovery.
Mm.
And I did a second degree in art history and creative writing that was completely heart-driven. I studied
Wow.
photography, interior design, floristry. I just went and did all the things.
Mm.
I took part in another musical. So I hadn't been in a musical since I was at school that we talked about before. I took the lead in another musical. Just, you know, it was this whole blossoming of
Creativity, yeah.
like, here's all the
Yeah.
creativity I've been clamping down and
Yeah.
and it just went color, light, music, action.
Brilliant.
And from that, I worked with a coach as well, and she helped me to see that I'd been reading coaching books since I was about 12. You know, because this way of coping, I'm sensitive, it's all hard, you know,
Yeah.
family used to give me some books like this, and I used to read them and listen to stuff, and it'd always been part of my life, and I was passionate about it. And the coach that I worked with, she helped me to recognize that passion, and she helped me past my limiting beliefs about, you know, coaching is cheesy and it's not a shiny button job. And then I just got clear enough and listened to my heart enough to think, actually, this is what I really want.
So, I mean, what I love about that, and I think what could be really reassuring for listeners, is when you first start, it's like an identity shift, isn't it? And so, and when you've had that kind of like that death experience that you spoke about, and then something new is blossoming, it feels chaotic for ages. It can feel chaotic for quite a while, and you can, like, I love the way that you describe it, because I think sometimes it can feel like, or the self-talk can be, I'm here, there and everywhere and I can't settle on anything. You know, I need to make my mind up, and we put this pressure on ourselves to come up with the answer really quickly. But the way that you describe it, if we can think of like just this newness is blossoming, and just this aspect of self wants to just roam around and have this delicious time, and then it'll settle somewhere and bring all of that we've learned together in one place. I think that's really reassuring to hear. And what did you do to help you listen to your heart? Was there something, was it like a practice, or just an intention, you know, to kind of settle?
Okay, I think it was a lot of different things. So I was working with a coach myself who was challenging me a lot. I was reading a lot of self-help, you know, like books about finding your life purpose, and I'm not a consistent meditator, but I do guided meditations. So I was listening to guided meditations. I've always exercised, and my exercise that I did changed as well, because for a long time I suffered from PCOS, or PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Right.
And it affects your hormone levels and things like that. So I changed my diet, all changed. You know, I went like gluten-free and dairy-free. And I changed from very hard boot camp exercises to doing ballet. And I think ballet is also, you know, a creative form of, you know, you're using the body in a creative way, rather than just doing 10 more sets or whatever.
Yeah.
So I changed a lot as a person, and part of it was the health side of things, which was brought about by, you know, my hormones are all over the place. I need to get those back in line. And as I worked on that, it also brought some other things into place as well. So it was a whole journey. It was a journey of creativity, but it was also a journey of nurturing.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and I don't think we would necessarily put those two together, would we? That nurturing of self from a physical standpoint would lead to a more soulful expression of self in work, but it makes sense, you know.
I just thought of another key thing that led to this was I worked through Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, that was in the mix, definitely. And so I was writing the morning pages that are part of that.
Yeah.
And the morning pages were telling me, you know, things like have a desk that has things to be creative on it, and it was actually, you know, drawing out what the desk would look like and what art materials it would have on it.
Yeah.
Or going on artist dates where I, you know, went to the local aquarium and looked at all the fish, or, you know, it was that opening up into creativity.
Yeah.
So carry on.
So so you sound like you became a bit of a unwilling expert on transitions, and then kind of settled. And I know for a lot of sensitives or empaths, like those of us that take in a lot of information, and some people like myself who's on the autistic spectrum, it can be overwhelming because you just get all this different information coming in. And I wondered if you'd got any advice of how to kind of, it's a big question. I know it's a big question on how to manage those transitions, but particularly from that point of view, that perspective of kind of overwhelm with all the information.
Yeah. Okay. If you're, do you mean transition in the moving house, or any kind of transition?
Actually, I was thinking about transition from one identity to another, but any kind of transition, actually, whatever comes up for you to answer that question would be great.
Yeah. I think that it's important not always to rush yourself.
Yeah.
And to realise that there is going to sometimes be that messy stage where you feel uncomfortable about not having a new identity. So I remember just after I left teaching, going to a party and having people ask, what do you do? And wishing that a hole in the ground would open and swallow me up. And I think I cried on the way home, because I just thought, this is so embarrassing. Before I had this thing that I could tell people that I did, and now I don't. Yeah. It's these liminal stages where you're not what you were before, and you're not what you have become. And just allowing yourself and being kind to yourself while you're in that liminal stage. And, you know, as far as, you know, moving house can be a metaphor for any kind of transition. So I would say that when you move house, you want to kind of get used to things in a gradual way as well. So don't be expecting to have everything unpacked straight away or to know the whole area. Just take it at a pace that feels comfortable for you. And that pace might be different to those other people who are not so sensitive.
Yeah. And it's like I know a lot of us that are sensitive, we use our body as a way of processing that information, and we don't get it until it's gone through our body, you know, but once it's gone through the body, we get it. So it can feel like more hardy folk can adjust to change more quickly, but they might have a different experience that's not as deep as we would want to have, which is, you know, what you were saying at the beginning as well.
And that brings it back to, because it goes through the body, when you are going through transition, to make as a priority doing those things that look after your body.
Yeah.
So for me, like doing the ballet that I do is like a movement meditation. So it might be ballet, or it might be yoga, or, you know, for some people it will be the boot camp style exercises. Absolutely, you know, it will be CrossFit or whatever, but whatever is your thing, your movement, your flow of movement, then I think it helps the energy of all that's going on to move through the body.
Yeah. And
I think that, you know, the good nutrition and the getting enough sleep, which is something I had a lot of resistance to in the past, and have figured out ways to help myself to change that. That when you get those basic things right, it then makes the transition not really smooth, because it's going to be a change.
Yeah.
It makes it that little bit, it takes the roughest edges off it.
Kind of I used to think that self-care and self-love was like a glass of wine in a bubble bath. You know, it's so superficial compared to the depth that we need to allow ourselves to have. That's been a big transition for me. And I have keywords that I use when I think of, like, in case this is helpful, but when I'm choosing a way of eating or choosing anything, like exercise, running is my thing for me, although I like 5 Rhythms dance, you know, that's very similar to what is. Does this help me be steady and stable? because that's and I think if we have keywords like that, it helps us stay away from like the diet industry. You know, my self-image was used to be wrapped up in that, or the kind of, you know, tough. I love CrossFit. I did that for quite a while, but it helps us stay committed to ourselves if we think of like keywords that we want to use.
I think that's a beautiful idea, and it's an anchoring point as well, isn't it?
Sure.
Because, you know, I'm saying to you, I'm doing all of this, and you're never a perfect person, you know. Sometimes, and I think that and I've said this earlier on, as sensitives, I think an introvert, of course, comes into it as well. I think we have to be so careful about going into perfectionism. And that's where, you know, you have to be really careful about the diet industry, because a lot of that is fueled by perfectionism as well. And actually bringing yourself back to what works for me.
One of the things that come into mind as well about when sensitives kind of think about whether they're introverted compared to this isolation, I think that's a really, introversion, sensitivity, extroversion and isolation are a really interesting mix. And I know I've had conversations with other people as well who think that they're introverted, but they're not, they're just sensitive, so they need more alone time than you would expect an extrovert to have. And that extroversion is not just about being connected with people, it's about how you process information as well. I do this, I talk my ideas through, and it took me a while, and I know I've spoken to people about this as well, that it's being sensitive just means that you need to find your own unique way of being. And some people who are sensitive are very extrovert, and then, like you say, you can be very kind of introverted because you need time out for your sensitivities, and then you're ready to go back out again.
Absolutely. I see introversion and extroversion is about where you get your energy from. So if you if you like charge up your batteries by being on your own, then you're introverted. But that doesn't mean, you know, I love a great party, and yet I'm an introvert, because if I need to power up, I power up by being on my own. And an introvert gets juiced up and powered up by being with other people. Yeah, for sure. Okay. That's the difference. Yeah. I think that you're absolutely right. I think the sensitivity can go with either. You can be a sensitive introvert and you can be a sensitive extrovert. Yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah, and I think we maybe just slightly differ as well on our definitions of that, because for me, I've lived with somebody who's very introverted, and they have to process things internally, and I'm more extroverted because I kind of have to speak mine out to make sense of it. So I think, you know, and the Myers-Briggs testing, and I interviewed somebody about human design yesterday, and I think all of it is so incredibly useful, and we need to remember that we're a unique being made up of all of it. So just take what works for you. Yeah, and this is something that I think the kind of career coaching that I do, it's really different in that when I was at school, they used to get a questionnaire on the computer. I don't know if you remember them, Cara, and you used to like type A, B, or C. Are you most likely to do this or least likely to do that? I don't think, you got a printout of what you should become, you know, from 1 to whatever number it was. And the kind of career coaching that I do is very much about the individual and who they are as a person. And we do it all by talking about all the things that they've done in their lives, so the things that they like to do when they were a child, or, you know, the things that they do that just light them up, and take it from there. Right. So when somebody comes to you, then the focus is on, you know, obviously you work with people in career and life choices, so it sounds quite a creative approach, but also really what's the word, practical and substantial as well. And have you noticed that people are choosing careers that are almost like new careers, you know, making up new jobs almost, like, you know,
they didn't telling me that I could be a channel when I was at school, you know, and let a non-physical being talk through me. It wasn't an option. Are you finding that people that come to you tend to be those that are looking for something a bit more creative or a bit leading edge?
I think there's more and more of that, that people are owning up to that side of themselves, and there's so much more scope to be able to do something with that nowadays, especially with the internet. But it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's an entrepreneur. Because not everybody has it in their kind of soul makeup to be an entrepreneur, and that's fine too. And it's certainly not my intention as I coach people to kind of say, oh yes, you should be an entrepreneur, that's the answer to everything, because for a lot of people it isn't what's right for them. So it's finding the right thing for that individual. And you know, as you say, everybody is so individual, and they will need to learn what's right for them through experimenting, through getting out into the world and talking to people, and you know, doing test experiences to find out if the thing that they think is right for them is the thing that will actually be right for them.
Right. Yeah. See, I'm getting excited. My body gets excited now you're talking about tests, and I love doing personality tests and things. So if so for somebody who is listening to what you're saying and your story is like, oh, okay, you know, that's what's going on then. This is why things feel like they're not working for me, or I just don't feel like something's right. I'm not fitting in. There's something going on. What would be your kind of advice for them? There's a first step maybe to search if they're looking for a new career.
Well, first I would ask them just to check in about their general well-being, because some people are not ready for coaching. You know, if there are any listeners who are feeling that they are really not coping with their everyday, then I would really ask them to go and seek the help that they need. And that might not be from a coach. So where it's your work that you're doing is having a severe detrimental effect on your health and your mental well-being, you might need to get, you know, more help than a coach can give. And I would really encourage you to go and seek that first. If you're not feeling like that, then I think it's important that you have a look in the, you know, online in the marketplace about, you know, different coaches and how they approach things, and you will find somebody that you feel comfortable with and that you click with. And I think it's, in a way, it's more important to do that than to be looking at the marketing stuff on their website.
So your first recommendation would be to look for a coach. You think it's like, I mean, obviously you do. It's your job, but so that first step of looking for a coach, is there something outside of that they could be doing for themselves as well?
Yes, and I'll what I would suggest is, and again from my training, is a tool called the 3Bs. Okay?
Right.
3Bs are, can I bag it, which means can I just pack this job in, you know, and or can I not do part of it, or, you know, are there parts of it that I'm doing that I don't need to be doing? Because you might be doing a job to a level that you don't actually need to be doing it because of some idea that maybe that's expected of me when it isn't actually. So just look at what you're doing within your job and see, are you doing more than is expected of you? And what kind of stories are you telling yourself about your job? What kind of stories are you telling yourself about what your boss is thinking of you? And just notice that might not actually be what your boss is thinking about you. That might all be made up in your head.
That's a really, really good point.
So you have this idea, oh, they don't like me, they're not going to give me promotion. It might be all completely in your head, and they might be just stressed about something else completely. So that's like just getting a lay of how are things actually, or am I making this all up?
Brilliant.
Then the second part is, the B is for bartering. So out of all the workload that I've got, can I get somebody else to do part of this for me? can I swap something with somebody, that I like what they're doing and they like what I'm doing, and we can swap so that we both get to do something that we like better? Do I need extra help at home? And I think for women especially, this can be a really hard thing to ask for.
Cleaner keeps me sane.
Yeah.
But that was really tricky.
Yeah.
To really allow myself to have.
So can you allow yourself the help that you need? Can you allow yourself to invest in good food to eat? Good food that's easy to prepare, that's going to fit in with your busy lifestyle.
Yeah.
And that will mean different things for different people. Can you allow yourself the help that you need?
Yeah.
And then, you might work with a coach as well, just to discover, actually, do I need a career change? Because some people don't. Some people, it's all of this other stuff about the mindset stuff and the not caring for themselves well enough that is making the job harder than it needs to be.
That's such a brilliant point. Yeah. So we might be living a version of our story that's going off in our heads, which is very different from the reality that we could be experiencing without having to make any massive changes.
Absolutely. So I think that's it can be a great gift to somebody if they can figure that out, and then they can make the most of where they are right now if they just do the mindset stuff, do the self-care stuff, and have a completely different picture about where they are and what's possible for them.
Yeah.
So those are the first two B's: bag it and bag the tasks you don't need to do, barter it, get the help that you need. And the last one is better it. Now, this is for people, say that your family's depending on you for the income.
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of people will be in that position, and they'll say, it's all very well, Deborah, you talking about this, change career and get in touch with your inner spirit and all of that, but I need to pay the bills at the end of the month.
Exactly. Yeah.
Then the better it comes into play. So given that you're going to stay in that situation for the time being, what can you do to enhance your life right now? So I was listening to the coach, Jeanette Moore. She does a lot about the law of attraction.
Right.
Yesterday, I'm part of her Good Vibe University, and she was talking about the job that she did before coaching. And she said that she made her office feel like a great place because she brought in lots of plants, and she loves plants. And
brilliant.
She said, I love these plants so much, it almost like it made her feel a bit sad when she had to go on holiday, because she was thinking, oh no, I hope my plants are going to be all right. Or making your desk really feel like it's your desk, even if it's a hot desking and it's not always your desk. Wearing, having things to do outside your work, that even point towards where your spirit might take you in the future. So I had one client who was working 2 jobs, and she knew that it wasn't really her long-term goal, and that she wanted to do coaching. And I do a lot of coach mentoring, and like mentoring people who are in the early stages of becoming a coach. And she did an energy course in her spare time, and this just led to a whole flourishing within herself, and her allowing that side of herself to come out in her life. When I was teaching, I did piano lessons, and I used to go once a week and do piano lessons. And so that for me was saying, okay, I do need to go to work and make my work, but outside of that, I'm going to do things that fill me up.
There's some really, really good advice, and those 3 B's are the deep, aren't they? You could work with them for quite a while and make significant changes. And I know I went over to your website, and you've got a beautiful PDF there about making Sunday nights better, and some of the questions on there about what's the story to ask yourself before you go to work are really kind of power questions. So for people that would kind of want to know where you hang out online and to be able to get hold of that, where can they find you?
Okay, well, Cara, my website is www.deborahchalk.com. So my name is spelled Deborah, and then Chalk, Chalk, like blackboard chalk, which was a fun name to have when I was a teacher.
I bet. Yeah. Okay.
deborahchalk.com.
Yeah.
And then I'm on Facebook as Deborah Chalk Life Coaching as well. So those are the two best places to catch up with me online.
Okay, and I'll put those in the show notes, and I would highly recommend people get that. You know, for those of us that are used to online, it's called a free opt-in, but you know, for those of us that aren't used to being online, it's just you can sign up and get some information and keep in touch with you as well. And I would encourage you to have a look at that Sunday night blues. Remember when I was working for the government, I used to work for income support.
Yes.
So I used to process income support claims in the UK, and for any kind of American or Australian listeners, that's processing our benefits. And that Sunday night feeling, I mean, it's just the closest I got to working with my soul in that place, I think, was being a union rep, you know, and that was like supporting people, but that feeling is awful. And that's one of the reasons why I initially home educated my kids. They were home educated, went into school, and now they're home educated again, was to not have that Sunday night feeling, because it's just awful. But I really like how, you know, in that step-by-step process you put on there, that you can make changes that will help that Sunday night feeling without having to, you know, get rid of your job.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you can support yourself through it, and you can you can just settle into being yourself still on a Sunday night, rather than putting the mask on. Before you get to Monday.
And that's when you feel nourished, isn't it? When you start connecting to yourself in that way. And that can happen anytime. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been lovely. And thank you to all the listeners for listening as well.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be people that get a lot out of that. That's really stable and steadying and inspiring advice. So thanks so much. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too, Cara.
Bye.
Bye-bye.